So Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst, said the fool is the precursor to the savior. Why? Because the fool will tell the truth, right? And you can't redeem yourself without telling the truth. And in the court, so the court might be the place where the evil king rules. And that's one possibility, the king's court. Maybe the evil king is ruling. Well, you need a fool. Why? Well, the fool's beneath contempt. So the fool can say anything. Well, so is the fool or the king? Because if the fool is the only person free enough to say anything, it's not obvious that the king is in control. It might be the fool's in control that has the real power.
But he doesn't have the responsibility that goes with that.
Well, he has the responsibility to be funny.
Right, okay.
Right, well,
yeah.
So that is a responsibility.
Yeah.
It's a responsibility to tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's not the administrator, right? But at least he's the person who's feeding truth into the culture. And certainly comedians do that. Like one marker of someone you can't trust is, well, I have no sense of humor. I don't see why that's funny. It's like, yeah, you don't. That's pretty sad. There's some things comedians shouldn't be allowed to make fun of. It's like, yeah, you're going to decide that, are you? You're going to decide what people get to think is funny, this unconscious manifestation. You're going to regulate that. And you're going to claim pridefully that, well, yeah, I'm going to regulate that and things will be a hell of a lot better because of it. It's like, yeah, if you're the sort of tyrant that can't stand if you're the sort of king that can't stand the fool, then you're a tyrant. I'd like to be remembered, I suppose, as someone who was encouraging, because that's what I think primarily I'm doing, is encouraging people. It's like, yeah, you're full of problems and you're massive snakes and all that, but not fundamentally. You're the thing that can handle snakes fundamentally. Mm-hmm. So if you would be willing to. And I not only do I believe that in some sense, I know it's true. Mm-hmm. I know it's true. So I'm trying to tell people that. It's like, yeah, you're a sad case, but there's a hell of a lot more to you than you think, like way more. Enough to cope with the trouble of the world inside you. There is enough to cope with the trouble of the world. And if you had enough courage, you could let that out. Enough courage and faith, you could let that out, and everything would be better because of it. My dad was a school teacher. He's still alive. And he got disenchanted with school teaching in part because all of the authority in his classroom was taken from him. So if there were disciplinary issues in the class, it had to be brought up the hierarchy to the administrative echelons above him. And so he could feel his authority in the class slipping away. And he was quite an authoritative teacher. My dad was my teacher in grade 6. For math. I wasn't in his homeroom, but I remember, and by grade 6, this is about 12 years old, kids are pretty pushy and fractious, and 10 minutes before the class started, the first time my dad walked into the room, everyone was silent because he had a reputation, and the reputation was, don't mess with him. And it wasn't because he was mean. He had a hard spine and you didn't want to push him, but he was authoritative. And he also got disenchanted with television. So when he was young, and even when I was young, there were shows like My Three Sons and Father Knows Best. Can you imagine a show called Father Knows Best now? The closest I've seen to that recently is Ted Lasso. That's the only sitcom I've seen for like 5 decades in some sense that has a genuinely positive male lead. So kudos to Ted Lasso. You see that a little bit in The Simpsons, hey? Because that's why it was such an interestingly subversive show, because Homer's a bumbling fool. And Marge, in some sense, has the moral upper hand, but not entirely. But Homer, the thing about Homer is he's trying. He's not very bright, but he is trying. And he would like to be a good father, and he's faithful to his wife and his kids. And so there is this underlying solidity of that male character, but it's damning with faint praise. And now young men, they're under assault from two directions, fundamentally. One is all male authority is nothing but patriarchal oppression. And so imagine now you're an ambitious young man, which is the drive toward that authority. Well, all that is a manifestation of the power dynamic in men that produced the patriarchal oppressive colonial tyranny. And so now you're a moral young man, you think, well, my ambition is to be not only to be questioned, it's to be squelched entirely because it's nothing but a manifestation of power. Imagine that maybe you escape from that by some maneuvering. But then there's another assault that's waiting, which is all human activity is nothing but part of the force that's devouring the planet and that's going to put us all in flames. It's like, oh good, so not only am I part of the patriarchal oppressive force, but I'm also the despoiler of Mother Nature. And so if you tell boys that constantly, and you do, and then you also say all of the sexual advances that you make towards women on any front whatsoever are to be regarded with extreme skepticism, and then you feed them pornography on a non-stop basis, so there's an easy way out, and that's an unbelievably powerful...
Oh, it's a drug.
Oh, well, you know, no one really thinks this through in some sense, but any 12-year-old boy, 13-year-old boy can now see more beautiful naked women in 15 minutes than the richest king in history ever saw in his whole life. You think, well, you know, we don't have to worry about that. It's like, yeah, you have to worry about that. That's a huge problem, and it's a demoralizing problem because it offers an easy way out. If all of your ambition is nothing but the junior manifestation of power and should be squelched out of you as early as possible, and schools do this because they punish boys for playing, so hyperactivity looks like suppressed play behavior. So there's good animal models of that, by the way, and you can, if you deprive animals of play, especially juvenile male animals, a lot of this has been done with rats because they're very playful, by the way. If you deprive them of play, they'll play hyperactively when you give them the opportunity. And you can suppress that with methylphenidate. That's Ritalin. It suppresses play behavior. Now it focuses attention deficit. It's like, no, probably not. These boys just need to be out in the playground, running around playing like for more time than they're allowed with their boisterous competitive play behavior, you know, and we don't need competition. You know, all games should be cooperative, which is complete rubbish. It's not a game if it's just cooperative, and it's such a dopey view of cooperation. Like if you and I are playing one-on-one basketball, then, well, are we cooperating or competing? Well, did you bring a chessboard? No. You came to play basketball. Well, how about that's cooperation? We've decided what the rules are going to be. That's cooperation. Obviously, fundamental. We're playing the same game. That's cooperation. Think it through. And so then, are we competing? Well, yes, but what does that mean? It means, well, we're getting in each other's way in some sense while we're trying to hit the goal. But we're doing that in a way that improves our skill at hitting the goal. Because if you set up an obstacle to me, which is what you do if we're playing one-on-one basketball, you're making it difficult for me to hit the target. And so that means you're making me better at hitting the target. And if we do that optimally, then it's fun. The word sin is derived from a Greek word, hamartia, and there's a Jewish parallel semantic track, by the way, that has the same underlying structure. Hamartia is an archery term. It means to miss the target. And so what we're trying to do is hit the target. Well, what's the target? Well, that's the question. It's a hard question. But we're trying to hit the target. And how do you know? Well, what are people doing when they're playing sports? Like all sports, virtually, are circulate around hitting the target. It might be crossing the finish line first, so the target would be being the fastest among that group. So that would be swimming, let's say. Or it might be football, and all of its variants. Obviously, you're hitting the target. That's what basketball is. That's what shooting is. That's what archery is. It's all hitting the target. Now, we're hunting creatures. We're based on a hunting platform, and we're visual hunters too. And so we're looking at targets all the time and trying to hit them. And part of what we're doing when we're competing is we set a joint target, and then we set up an adversarial structure that improves our skill while we practice hitting the target. And so is that competition? It's like, well, no. It's not competition in that the goal is to defeat you, even though I'm going to try to win because otherwise the game's no fun. The real game is, can we make each other better in a sustainable way so that we can hit the target more effectively? And men, especially on the sports pitch, of course women do this too, but it's more of a masculine enterprise in some sense. It's a masculine enterprise, not a male enterprise, not for men only. It's honing your ability to hit the target. And when you deviation from the target, that's sin. That's what it means. It's so useful to know that. It's like, Well, I missed the mark. And then you're guilty about it. Well, you should be. You're supposed to hit the mark. And what's the mark? Well, the mark is the line between order and chaos. Or the mark is the playful engagement in good conversation. The mark is a really intense game, eh? An intense game is you're serious about it. The person is pushing you right to your bloody limit, and vice versa.